Module 1, Assignment 1. Today we're going to work on these different pieces of furniture for our Advanced AutoCAD for Interior Design course. The assignment is located right here, and the title block is located right here. You can download the title block and then open the file in AutoCAD. So here's our basic title block that we use. It's in architectural units. We're going to switch over to model space. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to set up my AutoCAD interface. We're going to start off in the 2D drafting mode, which is this gear right here, drafting annotation. We're going to go ahead and take a look at our print. And I think we'll draw the table first. And we'll start off by creating these different two-dimensional shapes that will extrude, and then we'll move them into place. All of them have feet and inch units of measurement. So I'm going to start off on the furniture layer. I'm going to turn on my menu bar. I don't think we really need a snap. So for drafting and settings, I'm going to leave the snap and grid, and you can use that if you'd like. If we want to set that up for 1/2 inch and the grid at, let's say, 1 foot. Or let's make that 6 inches. Polar tracking we definitely want to be on. And object snap, we'll take the defaults for endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, extension, tangent, and apparent intersection. Alrighty. As we start to work with 3D objects, what we'll do is we'll start off by drawing the 2 discs for the table. And I think I'm going to change my furniture layer color to brown. And you can do that by clicking on the blue swatch. And we'll make that a shade of brown. And we'll start off by making a 2-foot diameter. And we can verify that by clicking on it and checking the radius of 1 foot. I'm also going to turn on my line weights, make it a little darker. I'm going to make another disc for the bottom of the table. So that's the top of the table right here. And I'll make another disc which is going to be 1 foot 2 inches. I'm going to turn on my tracking under my drafting settings. Object snap tracking, and I'll show you how that works. It's a really nice feature. What we can do is when we draw the second circle, we can kind of hover and acquire this, and then we can track over to the side to keep them even. And I think I'll track this one down to about here, and then we'll make that a diameter of 1 foot 2 inches, or 14 inches. And then we have the pole that holds them together, which is a 2-inch diameter. And so we can then, again, if we want to keep them all lined up, we'll say 2. So those are all the components that we need to create the table. And the one method to do this would be the cake method, where it's like creating a cake layer, and then you put another layer on top of it and another one. And so what we'll do is we'll change to an isometric view. And then we'll invoke the 3D commands, 3D workspace. And I like to go with the 3D modeling. We could use the basics as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this, or we'll press pull it. Since it's a boundary shape, it doesn't matter which one we use. If it's something that has a number of different line segments, then we're better off to use press pull because it will create a region out of it. So we'll say extrude, we'll click on it, we'll hit enter, and then we'll bring that up a distance of 1.5 inches. We'll do the same for the other piece that goes on the bottom. So we'll say extrude, and you can change the visual style, conceptual, extrude, select that, hit enter, 1.5. And then the height of the pole that holds them up is going to be 2 feet, 1.5 inches from the bottom to the very top of the table. All right, and then what we'll do is we'll just assemble this. Again, we want to check our O snaps, and so we can come back up here. Tools, drafting settings, and we want our 3D O snaps enabled, and we'll OK that. And then I'm going to change this out of conceptual to make sure that I get the pole in the right spot on the bottom. And so what I'll do is I'll just use a regular move command. I'll select the object. I'll move it from the center to the center of the bottom one. Verify it with a shade. And then I'll do the same thing for the top. And I'm not sure if I got the top or the bottom of that, so I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm going to say move. And I want to make sure that I get the top one, which would be this one. The bottom one, the bottom center point is here. I can verify this, conceptual, and then I can union these together so that we don't have the pieces flying apart, because until you union them together, they're all separate geometries and they can still be moved apart. And so what we'll do is we'll come over here to our Boolean operations, and we'll say union. Here we have it. And we'll select the tabletop and the pole. And now these two pieces are glued together. And then we'll do the same for the bottom. Alrighty. The next thing that we'll do is we'll bring that into the floor plan layout. And so here we are in the floor plan layout, and this is our viewport. And what we can do is create a new viewport. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to 2D model space, drafting an annotation. And I'm going to create the viewport. And when we work with viewports, we have the ability to create circular viewports. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete this viewport out. And then I'm going to go to my viewport layer. I'm going to set that viewport layer. I'm going to make that a different color. I think I'll go with this purple. And what I'll do is I'll create a circle. You can move that circle by clicking on the geometry, clicking on the grips and moving it. I can hit escape. And then I can convert that to a viewport by saying view viewport object. And I can click on that, double click within the viewport, and then put my table there. And then I can turn off the grid and the snap within that viewport. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is to create the 2D geometry. So back to the model space. And I'm going to take a top view of that. And I'll show you another technique that we can use for drawing that. I'll switch back over to the furniture layer, and then we'll draw this using our polar tracking. We'll say 2 feet. We'll track up 1.5. Track back over 2 feet. And we'll type C for close. And I'm going to move this over a little bit to give myself a little bit more room. And then I'm going to create the rest of the geometry. And so I'm going to offset that top line 2 feet, 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to draw a line down the center. I can offset that line 1 inch to each side. And delete that center line out. And actually, I'm going to keep that center line for 1 more minute. And I'm going to offset that 7 inches to each side. I'll offset the bottom 1.5 inches. And then we'll erase and trim. Trim. You can just glide right through. Oops. That should have trimmed. All right. There we go. And then we can put this on a center line layer. And since we don't have a center line layer, I'm just going to make one. I'm going to say new layer. Make the color red. And I'll make the line type center line. I usually take this center 0.5. There we go. Now it's changed. And typically I'll make the default line weight for that 0.3 millimeters. Select that line, put it on the center line layer. And center lines should extend a little bit beyond the object. We can adjust the LT scale to make that look a little better. And we'll change that to 4. And then we'll put our dimensions on it. So we'll go to our dimension layer. Click on our linear dimension. And we'll start at the bottom. You always want to use O snaps as you create these dimensions. And they're a little bit large, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the dim scale for that. So I'm going to say dim scale, or we'll go into the, so I'm going to adjust my dim scale by saying dim scale. I'm going to make that 1 foot or 12 inches. And then I'll put a dimension. Don't worry if it's architectural ticks or arrowheads. And you can move these dimensions if you want to reposition them by clicking on it with a grip. And positioning it in a different location. And you always want to make sure that your object snaps are active so that your dimensions are per the print. All right. Now that we have the two-dimensional view of the table, we can go back to the layout and we can create another viewport. So we can go back to our viewport and we can create a rectangle. So I need to double click outside of this viewport to get it into paper space. There we go. Now that we're in paper space, I can create a rectangular viewport. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. We can say view viewport, one viewport. And then we can double click within that viewport and get ourselves a top view. And then we can position that. If we want to disable the UCS icon, we could say UCS ICON. I'm going to change it to off. And then I can put that in at a scale. Quarter of an inch equals a foot is a little too small. Half an inch, we'll adjust it a little bit larger. Let's go with 1 inch equals a foot. That looks great. We can adjust this one as well. And this one is at 1 inch equals a foot, so we're in great shape. You can move your viewports, and so we can move the viewport to line things up. And that completes part 1 of assignment 1. We'll come back and take a look at creating the computer monitor in part 2. We're going to save this file. And we'll save this as our initials. -lab 1. And I'm just going to put CAD 136 on it so I can remember. And then we'll be able to take that file and submit it to the assignments folder within the Dropbox. Make sure that you update the title block information. Put the correct date on it. And we'll model the next part in the next video.